China is the one country that can change, as somebody said, the climate, not just the weather, across the world in terms of security. And it certainly is the most powerful authoritarian state, and one that would like to see other countries, in a way, emulate its form of governance. And it has the clout to be able to undermine democracy subtly, not by invading them, not by taking them over, but through technology, through economic partnership. It can weaken democratic countries and governance around the world in a way that's a lot more subtle than the obviously overt stuff that Russia has done.
Those tensions, Robin, between China and Taiwan have continued throughout the year, haven't they?
Yes, look, this is, as you said, one of the deepest and most worrying standoffs, if you want to call it that, out in the international context today, not least because Taiwan, there's a long history to this, obviously. The mainland Communist Party government see Taiwan as a sort of renegade province that needs to be reunited with the mainland as quickly as possible. It is not only an article of faith, it is also almost a test of the credibility of the Communist Party of China that this should happen. And in particular, this should happen before the 100th anniversary of the inauguration of the People's Republic of China in 2049. That sounds like a long way away, but what the Chinese have been hoping is that gradually Taiwan would be sort of economically absorbed back into the mainland. Instead, what they're seeing is the opposite happening, that in Taiwan, feelings of separateness, support even, though people avoid the word, for independence from China is becoming more open. And what the Chinese leadership see is let's say, Ukraine or other parts of Eastern Europe that had been at least in the sphere of influence of Russia, that what happens as they become more democratic is that they peel away. And Tsai Ing-wen, the current president of Taiwan, is a leader of the party that rejects ideas of reunification with China and mainland China, and that is becoming ever more democratic in the way it operates. Okay. So the more that Taiwan becomes a democracy, the more threatening in a way it becomes to China, the more unabsorbable it seems to be. And so I think we're seeing a real risk of this becoming a very big source of international tension in the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, and we've had a lot of warnings about what could happen if China were to actually invade Taiwan. But in the meantime, there is also this question about how much we in the West rely on China for so many of our goods, our supplies, technology, and so on. And back in July, the heads of MI5 and the FBI came together to give a speech calling the Chinese Communist Party a security threat. This was the head of MI5, Ken McCullum.
The most game-changing challenge we face comes from the Chinese Communist Party. It's covertly applying pressure across the globe. This might feel abstract, but it's real and it's pressing. We need to talk about it. We need to act.
Well, shortly after that joint speech, the new Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, set out Britain's strategy towards China. This is what he said at the Lord Mayor's Gala last month.
We also need to evolve our approach to China. Now, let's be clear, the so-called golden era is over, along with the naive idea that trade would automatically lead to social and political reform. But nor should we rely on simplistic Cold War rhetoric. We recognise China poses a systemic challenge to our values and interests, a challenge that grows more acute as it moves towards even greater authoritarianism.
Well, that was Rishi Sunak speaking there. And Robin, there has been some real soul searching, hasn't there, about the extent to which we in the UK and many other parts of Europe and the rest of the world are dependent on China. And there was some concern within the Conservative Party that what Rishi Sunak said there, if anything, seemed to downplay the threat from China.
Yes, I mean, if you want to parse P-A-R-S-E, his words, he used the term systemic challenge. And systemic challenge is an alternative to threat or acute threat. The integrated review on foreign policy, security and defense development that the Johnson government released back in March 2021 described Russia as an acute threat, but kept softer language for China. And what's noticeable is that Rishi Sunak has done the same. The phraseology, he talked about it being a threat to Britain's economic security, but that was quite different from being a systemic challenge overall. And so what you see in Rishi Sunak is what the whole speech was known for, with this wonderful phrase, robust pragmatism. It's a bit of a contradiction in terms when you use it together. You need to be robust sometimes and pragmatic others. But when you're saying you're going to be robustly pragmatic about everything, it begs the question as to what the policy will be. And look, it just reflects the reality that China's market is massive, big, and important for all countries in the world, by the way, including the United States. On the other hand, China is the one country that can change, as somebody said, the climate, not just the weather, across the world in terms of security. And it certainly is the most powerful authoritarian state, and one that would like to see other countries, in a way, emulate its form of governance. And it has the clout to be able to undermine democracy subtly, not by invading them, not by taking them over, but through technology, through economic partnership. It can weaken democratic countries and governance around the world in a way that's a lot more subtle than the obviously overt stuff that Russia has done. And how to manage that threat while you cooperate with China on climate change and so on is just enormously, fiendishly difficult.
Is there a particular issue or a particular part of the world which you think is going to be seizing our attention over the coming 12 months?
Well, we've always got to keep our eye out for North Korea. It's a country run as a cult, and it just always got to watch out. It's a very dangerous country with now very long-range missile capability and nuclear weapons. Always worry me. You've got to watch out for some type of flare-up between India and China as well. We haven't had a chance to talk about a nasty new flare-up on a different part of the border there between those two countries that are really jockeying for position. But I think the most interesting thing to look out for in 2023, in a way, will be two. Can Europe rebuild its energy security so it does not rely on Russia in the new year? They've done some big steps in that direction, but can they hang it together? And the other thing is the rest of the world is trying to ignore what's happening between Russia and Ukraine and the West. They see it as a hangover from the Cold War. And we're seeing countries like Saudi Arabia, Turkey, others around the world. And I talked about this in my farewell lecture back in July of this year. They are triangulating between Russia and China on the one hand, and America and its allies on the other. And so we're seeing these countries really come to the fore with their own foreign policies, their own plans. And it's going to make for a lot more complicated foreign policy in the future.
Robin Niblett, Distinguished Fellow at Chatham House, the Institute's former director. Great to have you with us today. Thank you so much for your time.